Welcome to another video. I am back from my summer break and I'm going to be talking about the Hetalia World Stars anime that came out earlier this year. Overall, I think Hetalia World Stars is a great comeback for the Hetalia franchise. The anime adapts the comics well while including some well-written original scenes. However, the anime did leave me wanting more, though that's not necessarily a bad thing for the franchise, but I'll get into that at the end of the video. One final note before I start, though, is that I will be referring to the comics for this video, so there may be a few spoilers of what future episodes and seasons might cover. Also, of course, there will be anime spoilers in this review. So, a brief summary of this season is that the season basically covered 3 stories, and the first story was the reintroduction of our main characters, namely the Axis powers and the Allied forces. And then the second story introduced Czech Republic and Slovakia, and this third story covered the Industrial Revolution arc. And all 3 stories were within the first 10 episodes, and the last 2 episodes were just random Hetalia stories with splicing the comics together. And those episodes included the spa chapters, Spain's olive oil industry, the Italy brothers, weird festivals, and Japanese exorcisms, and more. And one thing I noticed is that while this anime is a continuation of the Hetalia series, this season also served as a soft reboot. For instance, the first episode of Hetalia Season 1 has a world meeting, and the first episode of Hetalia World Stars also has a world meeting. Moreover, the World Stars seasons adapt the Hetalia World Stars comics, which fall under the shonen category, basically for teen boys. Unlike the earlier Hetalia Axis Powers comics, which was for seinen category, which is basically the young adult men in Japan. So that's interesting, and you can kind of see that it's not as explicit or inappropriate as it used to be, and that's because of that audience change. Although it is interesting that the dick jokes are still appropriate for PG-13 content in Japan, but, that's just a difference in culture. Another thing that I noticed is that the anime is starting to distance itself from its World War II story origins. You still have the Axis powers act as a trio friend group in some of the scenes, particularly in the first episode as well as the last episode. But overall, they're trying to not be as explicit about certain events and not condone those actions. And one example is that in the comics originally, when Slovakia notices a hyphen edition in 1938 and is celebrating about it, he actually compliments Germany in the comics, and they removed that for the anime, and I think that was a good call because I just know that people will not respond positively to someone celebrating Germany's actions in 1938 because it was not a good time. Other than that, though, I feel like, I guess they're trying to make it less problematic. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't really care, to be honest, as long as they don't, change it too much. But Himaruya already changed his style of storytelling for switching to the shonen category, so I just hope that the anime reflects that. It does bother me that Funimation still puts this season as TVMA for the mature rating. I know it's not really Funimation's choice to put that rating. It's either because, the Americans either decide to keep that rating when they reviewed the season, or maybe it's because they consider it all part of the same Hetalia thing, so might as well just keep that same rating. But this kind of bother me because it's not really mature anymore. It's kind of more for 14 and up kind of thing. So we'll see. But alright, so one exciting thing about this season is that we did get new characters, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and a little bit of Portugal as well. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I got excited when I saw these characters animated on screen. I know I've already actually gotten to know them a little bit because I've been reading the comics during the comic hiatus as well as the anime hiatus, and then I started reading the new comics now recently that I've restarted, and it's been very good. It's very entertaining seeing the Southeast Asian countries, which is a big excitement for a lot of the fan base. I hope we get to see them animated soon as well. But yeah, it was really nice seeing Czech Republic and Slovakia, and I did notice that the anime made their relationship kind of shippy, which is actually not new for Italia. They do it all the time. We have Bull and San Valentino with Germany and Italy, And then you have the Austria-Hungary, Prussia-Hungary love triangle kind of thing. So it's not even the first hetero parent either because we have. So that was not new per se, but it was still kind of a nice touch because none of them are canon couples, but not every popular fanship is hinted at in the anime, but in this case, this is kind of a very, okay, here we go, we want the fans to kind of ship these two. So it's definitely obvious there. And as for the characters themselves, I think they're all unique. They all have added something new to the show, which I think is good. Czech isn't really like the other girl countries that we've met. I mean, there's not that many of them, so it's really nice seeing her be added. But also she's just very different, and you can see that when she interacts with Hungary over the spas and arguing with her about that, as well as Czech interactions with Liechtenstein. You can definitely see the difference in personality there as well. Now, for Slovakia, it did kind of remind me, and that was from back when I was reading the comics. He did kind of remind me of Spain a little bit. His design is kind of like Spain. His personality is also kind of like Spain. But there's a difference though, because like Spain, he was once like a big empire, and you kind of see a little of it of that side sometimes. He misses the old days when he was powerful. Slovakia doesn't have that because he's never really had that experience. He hasn't experienced true independence until the Velvet Divorce in 1993. Before then, he was under Hungary, he was under Austria, he was under Russia, he was under Czech. So he hasn't really been like Slovakia until recently. So it's a very different backstory, if you may, and I think that really plays into his character. Definitely makes him unique, and I really hope I get to see a little bit more of them when they're not together. I get to see a little bit of what Czech is like when she's not with Slovakia, but I don't really get to see much of what Slovakia is like without Czech, and that's even goes for the comics too. I don't think I've ever seen a scene in the comics where it's just Slovakia, so I just hope to see that more. I know it's becoming very expansive. I don't know how he manages it because there's so many new characters. At the same time, if you just keep doing old characters, it gets old, even though there's so much stuff. Like if you just have, let's say for example, you have England as a main character, which he kind of is for the Industrial Revolution, or you're not going to run out of stuff to talk about, but at the same time, people do want to see. So, yeah. And as for Portugal, I mostly know him from the comics, and the anime had a very interesting introduction for him. Portugal kind of is introduced in conjunction with Spain. It was nice seeing him like tease Spain, but I do hope we get to see more of what he's like when he's not with Spain, or what he's like with other European countries. So, alright. So, now we've gotten over new characters, we should go over the main characters again. And I did say that the main characters were mostly reintroduced in the first arc, the meeting arc. I think the arc was called the Weirdos. That's basically how they describe what countries are. Countries are weird. They're not really rules of what they are. They're not really humans or immortal beings, and we don't really know how they work. And they're all each very unique. They all have different systems, and they all work for their bosses. So that was an interesting reintroduction. And I think actually it might actually be the first formal introduction, because I think in the very beginning you just kind of jump into the story and you don't really get like, okay, these are countries, these are personified countries. No, it's usually just like first episode, boom, it's a world meeting and people are arguing with each other, and America's like laughing, and Germany finally makes everybody shut up and starts the world meeting, and that's pretty much it. There's no like introductory thing. Unlike with this season, they kind of see some of the ancient countries and how they even refer to countries' deaths, which is kind of sad, but that's a fact of life and history. But yeah, it's really nice seeing the main characters again, and we really get to learn more about them. And then, of course, to be clear, the main characters are the Axis powers and the Allied forces, namely Italy, Germany, Japan, America, Britain, France, Russia, and China. And that's the rough order. I know Italy is definitely the main character. That's why it's called Hetalia in the first place. And we get to learn new things about each of them in the season. I don't think we learn anything new about France, though. I think he's the one character that doesn't get that much development this season, but we do get to learn a little bit more about the other characters. I think of all of them, England gets the most development, which is surprising, but also not surprising at the same time, because he's very multifaceted compared to the other characters. And so the things that we've learned this season is that Italy makes a terrible art teacher. where Germany was once pretty naive, which was very interesting. Japan taught England his culture. America is a workaholic. Russia struggled with industrialization because of his bosses and also likes to hear the sound of countries arguing with each other. And China already had cars in the 17th century. So that was all interesting facts about both the history but also the characters. Some of them are more historical, some of them are more character based. I will say though about the China cars thing is that they didn't mention the fact that the cars were actually commissioned by the Chinese emperor to a Belgian person that was living in China at the time. So it wasn't like a Chinese person came up with it. It wasn't exactly like that. So I just wanted to make that clear. And it wasn't really like it wasn't a practical vehicle. It was like basically powered by fire burning the center of the thing. So it wasn't really meant for someone to ride on long term without getting burnt. It definitely wasn't meant to ride down the highways or anything. And I don't think China was necessarily interested in doing that because they already have everything. You have everything, you're not interested in development. So that's just, it's a difference between what China had versus what Europe and during industrialization. Of course, most of these learned facts come from the Industrial Revolution arc, which I really liked. I really liked how they framed the story. The story was framed around England, which is original to the anime because it's not in the comic chapters. And I think it definitely streamlined the story because without that, it just feels disjointed, which I kind of felt a lot with the last two episodes and even a little bit with the first two episodes. That feels very disjointed it almost like whiplash feeling when you go from one story and suddenly jump to another story and then jump to another, and there's no connection between them. Like the Industrial Revolution is like, okay, we're all in like the same time period, and yeah, we kind of jump from different points of view. Like you see England's point of view, and then you see Germany's, and then you see Russia's and Latvia's, the Americas or Romanos, and a little bit of Spain. And it does feel disjointed when I say it like that. But when you watch it, it's like, okay, we're all in the same time period. They're all kind of moving towards the similar goals. So it was very entertaining, and I liked how they did it because in the comics it's a little different. In the comics, you don't really have that England focus. The first chapter is literally just Germany and Prussia doing something for England and making it. You don't really see how it starts. So they definitely added some new original content with like England coming up with machinery and really starting the movement, as well as his conversation with France, I think is also original, and France talking about his situation with revolution and stuff, so he's not necessarily ready to become an industrial power, unlike England. And America too, you get to see a little bit more about him, his, industrialization and how he models it after England, but also makes it bigger. There were a couple of moments though from the different chapters that aren't really covered in the anime because they don't have time to streamline the story, right? So you can't have too many different moments and lengthening the episode. Each episode's 5 minutes. So there was a lot of lost moments that I liked from the different Industrial Revolution chapters that you don't get to see in the anime, which I'm going to go over really soon. One of the moments that I missed was when Romano arrives in America and basically plays out in the comic just like how you see in the anime, except for at the end when end of one scene when Romano is like almost gets beat up by America, and then he like freaks out, and then they basically have a conversation about what Romano can actually do, because America kind of figured out that Romano's terrible at cleaning. He doesn't really come off like a hard worker. They kind of figured out what to do, and America finally suggests, hey, why don't you cook for me, because I really like Italian food, and I really want to try Italian food. And then Romano goes into a whole self-motivational speech where he's like, okay, I'm gonna start restaurants and make a whole restaurant empire, and it's gonna be great. And America's like, you're way more optimistic than me now. And this is kind of, showing a little bit of how Little Italy started and how we have the Italian American food that we have today. And I did talk about this a little bit in my last, comic focused video when American Italian food is brought up, going over what Romano's contribution to that was. And so it's kind of missing from that, but at the same time, it doesn't really connect. Maybe they will do a future episode when they talk about food in America and they'll go over that. But yeah, that was a moment that I missed. And the other moments I missed was also with Germany and Prussia, the way that the comic is structured. So the founding of Germany was kind of in chapter 13-ish. Industrial Revolution is more in the 60s, 70s chapters. And the way that the comic is structured though is that the Industrial Revolution is chronologically speaking after the founding of Germany. It's such a big moment, talking about so many theories that have been made about Holy Roman Empire and Germany and what the connection is and whatever. And I don't want to spoil too much, but that chapter kind of solidifies, but also doesn't solidify those theories and what the truth is. It's such a big moment. I think it's a good idea they didn't put that in this season yet, because that wasn't the focus of the season. But at the same time, like, that is like the previous moment, and then chronologically after that is, Germany and Prussia like working to develop and, industrialize Germany. So that's the missing context there that you would have gotten if you had read the comics, but if you watched the anime, you're kind of just, in the bubble that is the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, and there was also some other missed moments that are not in the Industrial Revolution arc, but they were in other arcs that were also very highly streamlined. One of them is actually was in the first 2 episodes during talking about the world meeting, and the way they structured the world meeting story is that they took different stories from different chapters that have world meeting settings, and they kind of spliced it all together into one long world meeting, which is not how it flows in the comics. It kind of feels like different moments, but here it's kind of just mash it all together into one. So there's a scene when Seychelles is like trying to name the members of the G8, and she remembers Canada, and Canada's really grateful for that, and it kind of ends there in the anime, and I was like, oh, that's like such a good moment though in the comics when Canada like figures out how to like thank Seychelles, and he goes over the top, and he wears a costume, and I don't know if it was like fireworks and confetti, and it was like and big, trombones and trumpets and stuff, and just like thanking Seychelles. And Seychelles is like, "Who are you? Because this is not Canada. It's not recognizable." And then Canada was like, "Oh, that was embarrassing." And America kind of makes fun of him for it. And that's kind of like I think the first part of a longer arc about the American Revolution. Again, it's rewritten in more of Canada's point of view, and it's just such a good arc. And I really hope they adapt that story in like future seasons because it is so good. Like it's one of my favorite World Stars arcs. Okay, so I really hope to see that soon. And finally, another missed moment, which is not as big of a deal as the other ones, but it's basically like Czech talks about her being a spa country, and one of the reasons that she says in the comics is that her visa application actually includes spa as a reason to visit. I was just like, why did they remove that? That's a big point of evidence that she can use to like support her argument that she is the spa country. Because without that, she just kind of comes off as bitchy about it to Hungary. It's like, oh, I know all about spas, and I know more about spas than you. I'm more of a spa country than you are, and it's like okay, use academia, which is not a very convincing argument in my opinion. But like saying, well, in my visa application, like you can literally put spa as a reason to visit. That's a legitimate reason to visit my country. You don't have that in Hungary. You don't have that in other countries. It's my country. You can do that. And it's like, well, that's a unique thing. That's definitely like, makes you the spa country then. So that was missing, and I kind of wish that was there. So to conclude, I want to say that a few other favorite moments that I had that I won't go over in too much detail was knowing a little bit more about Latvia, because before I got to see more Latvia as a scared child who doesn't have a filter, but we got to see more about him, which I thought was a nice touch. I also definitely like the small hints that they have about Austria and Spain's history. Some of my favorite moments in the old season was their interactions, and so to see that continue in both the very first episode as well as the olive oil episode was interesting. And finally, because I've been obsessed with Demon Slayer recently, so seeing Japan in his, new industrialized city, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like exactly how it happens in Demon Slayer when Tanjiro arrives in Tokyo, and he's like, what has happened here? Like, what has happened? Why is there a light rail? Why are there lights? What is going on? But that was just me being a Demon Slayer fan. So yeah, overall, I think this was a pretty strong reintroduction of the Hetalia franchise. It wasn't perfect. I think, I wish there was like more of just more. Like there's 12 episodes, it's so short. And I know they're adding a few more episodes to the DVD release. When I'm recording this, it's Thursday. I'm recording this Thursday. I think they released it yesterday and Wednesday, but I haven't been able to look at them. But hopefully those 3 episodes are also good. I hope that they will add more seasons and actually get to see some of the more serious stuff that I was very much looked forward to seeing. And another thing I noticed is that it's very clear they're not going to cover everything. Like, the comics cover so much, so I highly recommend reading the comics. And thank you for watching the video and listening to me ramble about Hetalia. This is my first anime review, so it's not perfect. If you have comments about how I can improve or how I can have well structure and how I can script these kinds of reviews better, I would very be open to those kind of criticisms and comments. So thank you very much for watching. Please press like and hit subscribe to support this channel. I am starting medical school soon, so I won't really have that much time to make new videos. I will be focusing more on my gaming channel, which is linked in the description below, as well as doing a few gaming streams. So that's how you can talk with me if you miss hearing my voice. But yeah, thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. Bye!